Good afternoon, and welcome to the Nebraska State Historical Society's Brown Bag Lecture Series, which is held here at the Museum of Nebraska History on the third Thursday of every month. A detailed schedule of this series is available on our website, and there you will also find information about all of the Historical Society's programs. That address is www.nebraskahistory.org, so if you are interested in finding out what we have coming up in our Brown Bag series, please go to that site or give us a call here at the museum. Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to thank the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation. They fund the filming of these lectures, and that financial support allows us to reach a much broader audience as we tape and then broadcast these programs on public access television. So we greatly appreciate their support for doing that. Today's program is related to our new exhibit here at the museum, and for those of you that have not been in to see the exhibit, it is titled Weird Nebraska, Strange Stories and Amazing Facts, and it's quite a fun exhibit. It will be here through 2006, so you have some time to come see it, but I'd encourage you to come visit the museum and go through that exhibit as well as the rest of the exhibits that we have here for you. Today's speaker is Dale Bacon. His official title at the Historical Society is Assistant Curator in the Library Archives Division. He is a longtime researcher of paranormal subjects and a giver of Lincoln ghost tours. Some of you may have been on one of his ghost tours. The title of his talk today is UFOs, Monsters, and Other Nebraska Oddities, a look at some historic weirdness in the Cornhusker State. So let's welcome Dale Bacon.
I wear the lab coat here. Doesn't that look official? Got my official Roswell alien press pass here and everything. First I was just going to wear it to say hi, and then I was going to take it off because it get hot. And the director was saying, oh, no, leave it on, leave it on, leave it on. So I guess we'll just leave it on for the time being. Well, golly, thank you all for coming today to hear about UFOs, monsters, and other Nebraska oddities today. I'm Dale Bacon, as Ann mentioned. And Ann had asked if I would be willing to kick off the Brown Bag Lecture Series this year with something related to the new Weird Nebraska exhibit. And it's like she said, it's on view out in the museum there. I definitely encourage you to check it out if you haven't already seen it. Well, I remember when she called, she said, well, we want to get this started, we want something weird, so we immediately thought of you. So I'm not exactly sure how to take that, but I thought, what the heck, sounds like fun. She said that I could talk about anything but ghosts. Okay, because a couple of years ago I did give a presentation on the haunts of Lincoln, and it was very well received too, and I had a good time. But she said you could talk about something else, and so my something else then turned into the title of today's talk, UFOs, Monsters, and Other Nebraska Oddities. You know, the word weird, and we struggled with this. I remember when we were first talking about getting this exhibit open, we talked about the word weird, and that's such a subjective term, and it's totally open to interpretation. So I had a bit of a time deciding what to talk about today. It's like, well, some of the stuff isn't really weird, but it is at the same time. And so with that in mind, I can neither confirm nor deny the truth of any of the stories that I tell you today. Okay. Like so many other people's, I am a collector. I have a personal interest in all things magic and wonderful. I just think that's a lot of fun, and I'm also a storyteller, and I'm always on the lookout for new information, new material that I can turn into a presentation like this, you know, with an audience. And over the years, I've collected several folders of newspaper articles, book clippings, personal accounts. You know, I've talked to an awful lot of people relating to all things paranormal, metaphysical, and out of the ordinary, these events that give us brushes with the unknown that happen to average everyday Nebraskans throughout the state. Now, I got pretty excited about the Weird Nebraska exhibit when we first started talking about this, and I immediately volunteered some of my stuff to be on display. So if you look carefully, you'll see my name popping up in different places out there. And I also wanted to warn you that I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I know that that's become one of those things is, oh no, he's got a PowerPoint. And this is also the first one that I've done in public, so bear with me. I do have a backup copy in the event that it all crashes. So let's begin, shall we? I didn't realize that when I first put this presentation together that the first thing I was going to be talking about actually today is an anniversary date of that particular incident. When most people think of the state of Nebraska, they think something like this. You know, it's a nice laid out map, got all the counties, everything's fine with it. When I think of the state of Nebraska, I look at it more like this, okay? Because, like I say, I've found many stories, you know, from all over the state that, that are just really, really interesting. But I mentioned the anniversary date of today. And we're going to Seward, to the Seward area. Our first thing, 130 years ago today, in fact, a fellow named August Meyer reported what he saw as an apparition occurring near Middle Creek, which is just a few miles east of Seward. Now, this was on a Tuesday night at 10 o'clock, and it apparently recurred constantly every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Now, he described this thing as a column of fire that would rise up out of the ground, about 15 feet high, about 8 feet in diameter, and as he was watching it, it would just bend over and then disappear, and other people started reporting seeing these things too. Ghost fireballs were a common occurrence, believe it or not, if you want to call these things common or not, but they were a relatively common experience in Nebraska. Out in Red Willow County, down around McCook, in that general area, folks that were living in Danbury and Lebanon would oftentimes refer to the ghost fireball of Hamburg. Now, there was an account back in 1953 of an individual who had experienced this ghost fireball. Now, the Hamburg ghost fireballs of Hamburg seemed to be rising up. These were just these little balls of flame that would just come shooting up out of the ground. And a lot of people that lived around there said that they were actually connected to the cemetery of Hamburg. And this was a little town that is long gone now. It hasn't been around for quite a while. But there are accounts of these fireballs actually chasing people, pinning them up against buildings, jumping over buildings. You know, it's just all kinds of really fun things. There was even a grave that was excavated to find out if there was actually anything inside the grave, to see if it might be associated somehow to the fireballs, and the best they could find were a bunch of coyote bones, which was kind of an interesting story unto itself. In July of 1947, there was a very interesting silver dollar-sized ball of fire that came crashing down onto the street in front of Mrs. Gertrude Sniffen and her son-in-law's house in Omaha. They said that it was just a flaming ball. It just came hitting down onto the street, and they went out to check it out. And they said as it cooled off, it just kind of deteriorated and fell apart. They said it kind of looked like little pieces of slate were left behind. Also in 47, around early July 10th, in fact, here in Lincoln, there was a fellow named W.L. Reynolds who saw what he referred to as a bright light. It was a flat ball of fire about the size of a silver dollar that came crashing down into his yard. And when he went out to check it out, the same thing happened. It just kind of faded out and disappeared. In the city of Lincoln, back in November 1892, in fact, it was November 21st, there was a very unusual thing that was reported in the newspapers and taking place in the area known as Belmont, just north of Lincoln. There were some ladies who were in their car, in the car that they were riding. They were going past the Emmanuel Baptist Church, and this was a building that was located at 12th and Butler Streets on the northwest corner of 12th and Butler Streets. This is what it looked like back when it was still the Baptist Church. Well, as the ladies were going past the house, or past the church, they saw what appeared to be somebody pressing their face against the window, one of the stained glass windows inside this church. So they dismounted their car and they ran over to see what was going on, and they checked the outside, and they could very plainly see this woman's face pushed against it. They then went around to the other side, started looking through the windows, and they could see that the church was empty, that there was nobody in there. Well, they got pretty excited about it and got hold of some of the custodians that were living in the area, and they went into the church and checked it out for themselves. And sure enough, I mean, even though there was nobody actually there, on the stained glass window, you could see very plainly a face pressed up against it of a young girl who appeared to be having some kind of problem going on, some kind of grief. The story spread. People from Lincoln were going up there, and by the end of the November 22nd there, the same year, 1892, it had kind of pretty much run its course. the folks had tried cleaning it off, but the more they cleaned it, the more pronounced it became and everything, and really kind of startled a lot of people, and they started making reference to it looking like a childhood friend that had lived in the area that had died and everything, and started to get real superstitious. And so the church finally took the window out. I'd sure like to see it, though. I'm kind of curious. I'd really enjoy seeing what that was all about. This is a nice view of the city of Lincoln back in the late 19th century. And there were an awful lot of things that would sometimes crop up in the newspapers. Very interesting stories. Like there was one particular tale back in January 3rd of 1885. There was a young girl named Alice Heath who was working in a place called Molly Hall's, which is one of these, what they kind of sometimes will call a social club. And she was one of these saloon girls who was working in there. She was a 17-year-old girl that had grown up in Ceresco and tried to make a better life for herself that didn't work. She came to work at Molly Hall. She was there for a few months. And one evening, she was talking with a gentleman at the bar. And in another room, there was a fellow named Barney Fitzsimmons who was talking to a woman named Maud, whoever she was, and he was trying to impress Maud. He pulled out his .38 caliber revolver and was saying, "Look at this, look at this, look at this." The thing went off. The bullet went through the room, hit poor Alice Heath, who we discovered later her real name was Pearl Forcade, but hit her right in the forehead and killed her on the spot. Well, it was a tragic move. There's no doubt about that. And everything was going as you would expect. The family arrived to take care of the remains, and everything was going along fine. And what does that have to do with weird Nebraska? Well, somewhere between the time that she was killed and the time that she was interred out at the cemetery, her body disappeared. Nobody was exactly sure where the body went, but everybody knew that it had disappeared. Now, body snatching was a kind of a phenomena that came through Nebraska in addition to everywhere else. I mean, it all started in Scotland and everything, and these were cadavers that were removed from their place of rest for medical purposes and what have you. And so the immediate suspicion was that her body had been taken for medical dissection. Oh, tragic thought. Nobody would consider such a thing. And immediately everybody started pointing to Cotner College, which was where the medical college was at the time. And they were all saying, "You guys did it, you guys did it." And the speculation just went wild, went rampant, and everybody was freaking out. And so they started running articles in the newspaper saying, "Calm down, calm down, calm down." And lo and behold, her body did show up. It came back to where it was supposed to. Everybody was satisfied that there was nothing out of the ordinary with it. She was buried, and the incident would have probably fallen, just kind of dropped and faded away had it not been for the fact that that same time period, a fellow by the name of Joe Martin actually did have his body stolen out of Wayuka Cemetery. The thing was discovered about the same time that the whole Pearl Forcade scenario was unfolding, and so nobody really paid too much attention to it until they discovered that some of the markings on the grave to indicate that there had been a disturbance kind of presented themselves, and so he was dug up. Basically, they opened the tomb, and there was nobody there. That body was never found, to my knowledge, and I have no idea as to where he went. But it recurred again in 1894, November 22nd, 1894, after the college had gone to great pains to make sure that they had a good reputation with the community and that we definitely are not taking bodies for anything like that. Lo and behold, it happened for real. And this time, it was a major sensation because the sexton had discovered that the ground had been disturbed. Kind of a weird little irony on my way over here this morning as I was walking by the Capitol building's funeral procession just very slowly comes going past me, and I thought, that's a little weird. I'm going to be talking about stuff like that. So I thought, that was a good sign. So like I say, in 1894, this Cotner University, they've got a picture up here on the projector, and the body of a fellow named Otto Albers was discovered missing. They dug the ground and they discovered that he was gone, and the police were brought into it, and the assignment was immediately given to this grisly looking fellow. This was Chief Detective James Malone of the Lincoln Police Department. And he was put on the trail. And he did everything legal. I mean, there was nothing out of the ordinary with what he did. He backtracked everything, followed the trail all the way to Cotner University, which is kind of funny. And he went into the university one evening, into the lower level, and he knew that he was on the trail when he got into the first room in there, because there was some student in there who looked at him, recognized him, and said, "Great smokes, there's Jim Malone. I'll bet you fellas have come after the stolen stiff." Boy. You just don't write them any better than that, folks. So Malone then went ahead and went through the process of going room by room until he got up to the medical section up in the top, up in the upper levels, and they did indeed find Mr. Albert's body that they had already started dissecting on that one. It was a tragedy but there were culprits on that one. The head of the medical facility, it was the demonstrator of the facility. There were 3 students and 2 janitors that all got arrested for that particular incident. Well, back in the 1840s, there was a phenomenon that started out east by a family known as the Foxes, the Fox sisters, the 3 sisters that started playing around with seances and Ouija boards and things like that, and they quickly developed what was referred to as the Spiritualist movement that just took the country by storm, as well as overseas, and there are still factions of the Spiritualists in operation today. The city of Lincoln was certainly not immune from having spiritualist church activities, and they had a lot of fun. In fact, with reference to the seances, on October 14th, 1875, there was an article in the newspaper that ran, "The public seance requested by the city of Lincoln is to be given by Mr. Frank Keelar, and it promises to be a grand success." They went to great pains to promote this public seance where everybody coming in, and apparently this fellow is performing better than the famous Davenport brothers. And believe me, during the spiritualist movement, the Davenport brothers were the act to beat. So they were definitely popular around here, and a lot of folks were involved in them. These are some examples of spirit photographs. That was one of those things that was kind of discovered by accident by the fellow, and I'm afraid his name escapes me right now, who actually came up with the first one. But he could see that, hey, there's some potential in this. And so these spirit photographs started showing up. And oddly enough, there was a woman by the name of Mrs. L. Carter, who was a spirit photographer who advertised at the Lancaster County Fair, September 7th, 1882, saying that for a short time she would be producing spirit photographs. Come on and check them out. So now this guy, this is David Abbott. This is a photograph of David Abbott chopping off his assistant's head, which David was a master magician. He was actually very well received among the magicians of the time. And he was kind of like Harry Houdini in that as a professional magician, he would go to seances and he would basically break them up if indeed, expose the hoax if there was something going on. So we do have a couple of photographs of him. Now, I said that I wasn't going to tell any ghost stories, but some of them are just too good to pass by. Forgive me if I keep looking at my watch. I have to time this stuff. I have a lot of material. Out in Hemingford, Nebraska, on April 24th, 1896. This image that we're looking at is actually a little later than that, but I tried to find some pictures that were kind of close to the time period, give you a little bit more of a perspective. Well, there was a cowboy by the name of Joe Healy who was referred to as pretty rollicking. He worked for the Carlisle Cattle Company. And one afternoon he was transferring, in April, he was transferring a group of horses across a river into a corral area actually on the Wyoming border. And as he was doing the work there, he was dumbfounded to find this spirit, this apparition-like thing. He referred to it as a man in white that's glowing and just kind of moving, swaying back and forth along the trail. Really scared the horses, and it kind of put him on his edge too just a little bit. He took care of the horses. He got them kind of safe, and then he rode back to confront this ghost. He was kind of curious about this. And as the story goes, our rollicking cowboy tried everything that he could to lasso the ghost, and he actually got so far as to empty his 6-shooter into the ghost. I can just picture this whole thing in my mind, believe me. Some movies are just asking to be made, you know what I'm saying? in Long Pine, Nebraska, back in on December 12th, 1904. We almost got an anniversary date to this one, too. There were a series of events taking place for the local mail carriers. In fact, there were 3 carriers that quit the job as they were confronted by an apparitional creature that kept scaring the devil out of them. It was along the Niobrara River, and each one of these guys reported the same thing. They'd say as they're going along the route, the skeleton would just start running through the trees and start leaping through the trees and just scaring them, scaring the horses. You know, they said that the skeleton actually at one point on one of the motorized vehicles, this thing actually came up and jumped onto the running board, you know, and everything. And at the time that this article came out, they had an advertisement for a carrier to take over this route. That was kind of cute. On October 3rd, 1963, here in Lincoln, there was an incident that took place over at Nebraska Wesleyan College. A lady by the name of, I'll come back to that one, a lady by the name of Colleen Butterbaugh had a very interesting experience. She had gone to the C.C. White building to track down a gentleman, a visiting professor named McCourt, who had residency, temporary residency in the C.C. White building, and I have a picture of that. Okay, this is the C.C. White building, this one here. And when she went to the office that she thought he was supposed to be in, she was immediately confronted by a very unusual aroma. It's like the smell of gas that had been released. And she knew that she was alone in the room, but everything seemed just a little dizzy. I mean, this is 63. They didn't have gas lighting back in 63. To my knowledge, I mean, Nebraska is more progressive than that. But nevertheless, as she was in the room, she looked through the room and she could see another section that was attached to it. And standing in the section attached to it where she's pointing out here, she saw a tall woman who was standing right next to the cabinets here, and she was reaching into one of the file cabinets. Well, the whole thing might have passed on had it not been for Colleen turning around and getting ready to leave the room. And now this is where she would have been over on this side, and this is 52nd Street. This is Willard's sorority here. And as she was turning, she glanced out the window. And where she should have seen Willard's sorority as well as all the trees and everything, she reported that all of that was open prairie that would have probably looked a heck of a lot more like this. And it really unnerved her. She had that temporary moment of displacement, and then she left the room. Everything went back to normal. She went and told her well, she went back to work, and she was having the stress over this. And so the dean, Sam Dahl, came over to her and asked if everything was all right. And then she proceeded to tell the story as to what had happened. The word started getting around, and there was a gentleman named, let's see if I can find his name here real quick, Glenn Cowan, who was one of the professor emerituses over there. He was one of them that listened into the story, and he said, you know, she does kind of sound familiar. She almost kind of reminds me of Clara Mills, Urania Clara Mills, who had been the music teacher at Nebraska Wesleyan during the turn of the century into the 20th century. And I have these are some images of Urania Clara Mills. They went to the 1915 yearbook, the Coyote I think it was called, and they opened it up to the pages that had these photos on it, and this image appeared on that page. And when Colleen saw that, she said that she visibly turned white. You know, she's really shaken. Said, that's her. That's the woman that I saw. So the story has been kind of going along pretty much ever since then, that the Wesleyan, the C.C. White building over in Nebraska Wesleyan was haunted by this lady here. There was some speculation that there was some mystery about Clara's death. You know, they said, oh, it was really died under weird circumstances, but she didn't. She died April 12, 1940. It was a heart attack, and this was confirmed by a fellow named Coleman Phelps, who called me up one day and said, I just wanted to tell you that she did die on this day, because I was playing ping pong with a friend of mine in the building that day, and when she came in, she said hi, went to her office, we heard a noise, we were the first ones on the scene, and she had died of a heart attack. And he said, I remember that very well because I shipped out the next day. So he was in the service, and that was his the last memory that he had of Lincoln before moving on to World War II. So that one's confirmed. There's no mystery about her death. Let's move on to other mysteries, though. How about vortexes? A vortex spot is an area where energy seems to stand on its head. You know, we think of vortexes like these mystery hills that we go to where the water runs uphill and all that kind of stuff. But Nebraska does have a couple of these places. One of them is the Sioux Lookout out in North Platte, supposedly. And then there's this place. This is Bigfoot Ranch. This was an area that founded up by the Niobrara by a fellow named Danny Liska, who was quite the adventurer in and of himself. And he wanted to have a place where people could come together and have metaphysical experiences. And so he founded this Bigfoot Ranch, which was the Institute headquarters, where professional psychics, including Indian medicine men and novices, would be welcome. I have a story, too, that deals with a vortex. Back in 1997, I was on my way back from the Black Hills, and I stopped in North Platte for the evening to get a place to stay, have a place, you know, go to a hotel and everything. And while I was there, I thought I'd look around and see what was in North Platte. I hadn't been there really to look around all that much. And I checked out Cody Ranch and all the things that we normally do. And then I thought, I wonder if the canteen's still down there. I'd kind of like to take a look at the old World War II canteen. And so I went looking for it. And I couldn't find it. I knew where it should be, you know, right by the tracks, just off the main road. I mean, it should have been there. And as I was looking, I finally decided, well, this must be it right here. It was just off the road. And so I parked the car and I got out and I walked over to this building, and I remember opening the door and walking in, and there was a lady at a cash register right onto my right, and there were a circle of elderly ladies that were just sitting in on chairs, just talking, having a good time. And it was a big open area that there's nothing in it. It was just a big open area. There were a couple of displays in the back and everything. And so I went to look around. I thought, well, okay, fine. I said hello to the ladies, and they said that they had worked at the canteen when they were young, you know, and that they would get together and have little reunions. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. They told me about the cakes and all the food and all that stuff. And then I left, never really gave it another thought. Well, last year, I went back to North Platte with a friend of mine, and I was going to show her the canteen. Well, we looked and couldn't find it, same thing. Wound up going to the public library. I figured if anybody knows, the library will know. And so we went in and I asked where the canteen was. And they said, well, it's a restaurant. It's down by the interstate. No, the World War II canteen. And they said, oh, well, that was torn down back in like 1973. What? True story, folks. Another little weird thing that Nebraska has, our old friend Carhenge. This was a thing that was thing. Oh, bless his heart. This is the result of a fellow named James Reinders and his desire to create something out of the ordinary. And so out by Alliance, he created Carhenge, which was inspired by the original Stonehenge over in England. I kind of have this in perspective so that we don't confuse the two. I want to make sure that doesn't happen. There was somebody from Scottsbluff, though, that said, you know, I saw a UFO land inside of Carhenge once. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting little segue. Let's move on into the UFOs. One of my favorite Nebraska stories of UFOs comes from, let me think, it was 63 years before Roswell. Okay, back in June 7th, 1884, a rancher by the name of John Ellis was, now this is out in the Benkelman area, was out doing his annual roundup. He had all of his cowboys with him, and they were out checking out the cattle, making sure everything was fine. And as they were out on the range, they all heard this whoosh sound, this very loud rushing noise, and they all looked up into the sky and were surprised to see what they thought was a meteor shooting across the sky, coming at an angle on its way down into crash course onto the earth. The guys watched this thing as it went over a draw, and they went riding up to the draw, and they looked over it just as they were watching this thing smashing into the earth and just leaving a trail 20 feet wide by 80 feet long, and everything that it came in contact with was burning. They went riding up to it. They wanted to check this out, and there was one fellow named Alf Williamson who was quite the brave cowboy. He got off his horse and he went running toward it, and it was so hot that they say it blistered the skin on his face and it singed his hair, and they didn't know if he'd be recovering his eyesight or not either. It was that bad. It was so hot that they left it at the end of the day just because it needed to cool down. They said all during the night, as the story started spreading, all during the night you could see the glow of this thing. It was so hot. They went back out the next morning with a fellow named E.W. Rollins, who was the brand inspector for the district, and they started examining some of the things that were lying all about the ground. They found what they described as pieces of machinery. They saw like a blade with a propeller screw on it that had an appearance of brass. They said it was like 3 feet long. Somebody picked it up with a shovel, and they said it only weighed a few pounds. You know, it's just unreal what this thing looked like. And but it was still pretty hot. And so they waited. More and more people were gathering, and they said, we're going to go check this out and start looking into it. As is always the case in a story like this, something weird happened. As everybody had accumulated and were ready to go, one of those famous thunderstorms that sometime plague western Nebraska came rolling through. And they said that it was a tremendous rainstorm that was approached in regular blizzard style. I can just see this thing coming in. It just poured. They said they couldn't see more than about 3 feet in front of their face. It was that thick. And when it was all over, about an hour and a half later, they went to check out the site and see what was there. And lo and behold, they came across a river. You know, in the area that they had been looking at this thing, and it all flushed downstream. And all they found were some pieces of some things that were falling apart, and they were just disintegrating before their very eyes. So it's like, I have no idea what actually happened out there, but man, they sure had an experience. And it's one of my favorite ones. That's another one that I could very easily visualize this whole story. The Phantom airship mystery started in California, but it certainly made its way into Nebraska. These are those weird little airships, see if I got one here, that started out on the West Coast and in the end of 1896, and they moved their way across the country, and they made it all the way to Nebraska. The first report that I came across of a sighting from this was in around February 2nd of 1897. And I'm sorry, it was around January 25th. The second one was in February. January 25th, 1897, when the people of Hastings noticed this large glaring light that seemed to circle around the town for a little while. It would descend, and then it would travel at remarkable speeds and go up a fully 15 minutes, and then it would lower, and just doing all kinds of maneuvers. And so that was the first report that I found. On February 6th of 1897, in the town of Innervale, which I've got up here, there were a group of people returning from a prayer meeting. And they looked up into the night sky, and they saw a bright light overhead. They said that this was an airship. It was conical in shape, and it had 2 sets of wings like on each side of it. They said that it resembled a canoe. Try visualizing this thing. The folks checked it out. They said that it had a bright headlight. There were 6 smaller lights on it, 3 on each side, and they seemed to have the wings, like I mentioned, with a large fan-shaped rudder on it. They actually heard engine rumbles, you know, the noises of the engines rumbling, and the voices of the airship occupants inside. And then these reports continued on. You know, York, Nebraska, they reported seeing lights in the sky. Omaha, members of the Aksarben group, the Knights of Aksarben, were having one of their ceremonies. And while they were in the middle of it, through the cracks in the corner boards, they began seeing this bright light moving through it. And they stopped their initiation. Everybody ran outside to see what this was, and they said that it appeared to have this steel body, that it was, from a distance, they said it was at least 18 inches in diameter. If you think about that from a distance, you know, 18 inches, that thing was huge. You know, whatever it was really, really big. There were other people that reported it too. I love this image. This is this isn't a real airship sighting, but it's the town of St. Petersburg, and somebody put some airships in it. And it's kind of interesting because these are the general descriptions that I've come across. You know, these are the ones. So whoever the artist was that put these together did a good job on it. One of the first UFO accounts that I've come across in Nebraska come from August 25th, 1877, when a person up in Omaha reported a balloon-shaped object coming down the Missouri River. It even knocked out a bridge. Some say it was a tornado. Others claim it was a UFO. You decide. Let's get into the 20th century here for a little bit, shall we? In the town of Hubble, Nebraska, there was a fellow by the name of William Lamb back in February of 1922. He was out doing a hunting. He was doing some hunting for whatever it was he was hunting for, I don't know. And he was surprised to find a large flying disc hovering at a distance away from him. He watched this thing for a little while, and it eventually left the area, but he said before it took off, there was this creature that came out of the ship, and it landed onto the ground and started walking away. Well, he went and checked it out, and he said that he actually could see tracks, and so he followed the tracks as far as he could go, but he did actually lose them over a while. Well, you know, 1947 was the big year. On June 25th, 1947, a fellow by the name of Kenneth Arnold reported seeing these flying discs out by Mount Rainier. Okay, and right after that, the floodgates were open, folks. This was the article that appeared in the Omaha World Herald on July 8th, 1947. I think that's what no, that says July 9th on there, but the event took place on the 8th. And this was when Roswell became famous. That was when the alleged UFO crashed down in Roswell, and it just kind of opened everything up for just all kinds of fun. The newspapers of that time are just filled with UFO reports. You would not believe them. June 23rd, El Cataract out by Ohio saw what he referred to as objects in the western sky that looked like shooting rockets going through the clouds 15 to 20 seconds apart. June 23rd in Northport, there was a woman named Hannah Smith who lived with her son Earl that heard a disturbance out in the chicken yard. They go out to see what was going on, and she saw two disc-shaped objects flying overhead at a very high altitude. Mrs. Fred Nelson, who lived in Omaha, said that on July 4th, she saw 3 of these objects at 3:30 in the morning, that they were round in the same brilliance as that of the moon. July 6, 1947, up in Omaha, Mrs. Catherine Bauer reported seeing a disk going southwest that was as large as the full moon. It was a round, flat, silvery object. Lincoln wasn't going to be outdone. Oh, no, 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 no. Lincoln came into the picture, too. Clerk of the Secretary, Hugo Serb, actually saw one of these mysterious objects on July 7th, 1947. He said that it looked like a shiny plane or a parachute, something like that, just kind of floated in the ground. A fellow named J.F. Hogan reported that he and his wife were out by Gretna, and they saw one of these things flying at 50,000 or at 5,000 to 10,000 feet. Mr. Hogan was a pilot, and so he said that I know these things. I know that it was not an airplane. Well, here once again in Lincoln, there was a fellow named Sam Goldfine who said that there was a bright disk that appeared about an inch in diameter. Okay, you're looking at these from a distance. This is what I mean when I say an inch in diameter. And that it soared overhead from north to south. There was Mrs. Arthur Knobman of Pleasantdale who said that on July 7th, 1947, that she glimpsed one of these things about 10 miles west of Lincoln. It was silver-colored and looked like a round ball or a disc. And P.H. Moore of Scott Avenue here in town also reported seeing 3 saucers as they were heading out that day. 6-year-old Bruce Kennedy even saw one while he was riding his tricycle. He saw a silver thing that went real fast through the sky. On July 9th, 1947, out in York, a farmer claimed that he had seen burning straw hats moving across the sky. Well, finally, the U.S. government, national scientists, called for a calm down, which people did start calming down after that. But that don't mean that they stopped, okay? In December 1951, a fellow from Lincoln was on his way past Peru. He was going to Indiana, and he saw this blue light in the northwest sky. He said that it glowed. It had a cauldron shape to it. It was a big thing. He said he could see it very, very clearly, but he was driving past it. He made the choice to not investigate and kept on going. On October 1st, 1952, right here in Lincoln, 2 men saw some silvery white objects flying over the downtown area. Now, they said that the objects were 100 feet wide, and that there were reports that came in that day all the way from Waverly out to Pioneers Park, people seeing something very similar. August 1st, 1955, over by Oxford, there were reports of dozens of lights in the sky, and those accounts came from Arapahoe and Orleans, too. In Lincoln, this is our claim to fame when it comes to Project Blue Book, which is supposedly the government's end-all report of flying saucers. Such things don't exist. But, however, on February 13th, 1957, there was a radar visual, Hynek Case RV-7, Lincoln Air Force Base, Nebraska. Objects were visually reported and observed by 3 control operators who were watching these on radar. Objects were observed on radar also by the NCOIC and the GCA operation, which I don't know what they are, but they must be official. And they were observed for a period of 3 to 5 minutes. They were viewed behind an airliner, but moving twice as fast as the airliner. They said that one of the objects broke in 2, and the other one executed a 180-degree turn, which is kind of unusual for ghost radar blips. On October 14th, 1958, State Treasurer Richard Larson had an experience where he saw one. He and a friend were returning from Colorado, and they were out by Pleasantdale. The name Pleasantdale crops up a lot in these stories. I don't know what's going on out there. But anyway, he saw something between 4 and 6 o'clock in the morning. It surprised him to the point, he said that it looked like an arc light, that was going through the sky, and it would get light and then die out, and light and die out. And it did this all across the sky. He actually pulled into a gas station. He got some of the attendants to come out and look at it too, because he wanted to make sure that he was not seeing things. They get a little out of hand, don't they, sometimes? This, by the way, is the water tower over in Ogallala. It's a great picture. I love that. It's in need of a new paint job. If anybody out there happens to hear this talk, please paint it. In Chadron, 1961, a Chadron farmer reported seeing flying objects streak across his land and do a remarkable thing, kind of a weird little thing that UFOs sometimes are known to do. As it flew over, it deposited this very fine hair-like substance that filtered and layered over everything, the trees, the grass, the farm implements, all this stuff. And he said that before they could do anything, it just simply started to disappear. And finally, in 1965, out in August, at the Sioux Army Depot out in Sydney, a fellow by the name of Captain Lee Beacom reported a very unusual thing. He said that he saw this light in the sky that was as big as a naval ship going through the air. He said that there was one large one and several smaller ones forming a kind of a triangle, which I think is interesting because modern day accounts of UFOs now, they're really going with this whole triangular shape thing, but here we're getting them back in 1965. War of the Worlds, folks, here they come. Had to slow them down. And I was going to show you this one during the Roswell thing. Probably the most famous UFO encounter that Nebraska is privy to happened on December 6, 1967. Now, as to what actually happened that night, I don't know. The story goes like this. There was an Ashland policeman named Herbert Shermer. This is Mr. Shermer here, who was doing a night patrol. And he was driving south from Ashland on Highway 6, and he got to the junction of 6 and 63, which is right here, at about 2:30 in the morning, and he saw red lights flashing. He thought maybe there had been an accident or something, and so he pulled off to the side of the road and went to check it out. And he said that as he got over to where the red lights were, he didn't see an accident. He actually saw something that looked like this. He said that it was size of, or shape of a football, about 20 feet long, 14 feet high, had a catwalk-like ring around the center of it there. That's what this thing is. And all of the little portholes up there had a series of red lights that were blinking on and off. Shermer said that as he was watching it, going to investigate it, going up close to it, it began to produce a pulsating siren sound, rose straight up off the ground and disappeared into the night sky. Well, he went back to the office that night, and in his, we'll come back to that one, and in his report, he wrote, this is the official police report, it said 2:30 a.m. sighted UFO intersections of Highway 663, believe it or not. Well, Police Chief William Watchin wasn't exactly sure whether he should believe this or not, and so on Monday morning, he and Shermer went back out to the site and did a little bit of poking around, and lo and behold, they found something. He found what he described as a piece of molten level. Molten level? What's that? A piece of molten metal, just a little strip that they gathered up. They were going to have it tested. They contacted the folks up at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha to see if they'd send somebody down to check it out, but they didn't get any response. Well, it just so happens that, I've talked to some people about that, and they say, oh, that whole thing was a fake, and we know who did it and everything. And, well, maybe, I don't know. It is kind of unusual to note that on that same night, there was a UFO report by Patrick and Albert Scholting, her of Lincoln, who saw a great glare of a UFO that had red, blue, and white lights that made a shrieking noise similar to the pulsing sound stated earlier. About a dozen boys from the Cristo Rey Catholic Home for Boys on Highway 77 and one of their counselors reported seeing a group of UFOs that were darting back and forth through the sky, almost like in a strobe-like fashion. Saw a whole bunch of those that lasted for about 40 minutes. And also in Lincoln, there was a woman, an unidentified woman, who called a police officer saying that she saw a UFO of extremely bright lights in the vicinity of Denton. And so there were definitely a lot of accounts that took place during that particular time period, 1967. The Nebraska Mutual UFO Network, those folks who were out there to preserve us and save us from the UFO menace, solved their first case on July 31st, 1973. They determined that the mysterious hole appearing in the barn roof near Bennett was not of extraterrestrial origin. August 12, 1977, near Pender, a man said that he was abducted by creatures from a UFO, but he lost his memory after he got onto the ship. In 1983, there was a couple from Seward who reported seeing a fiery red thing 30 feet off the ground, and they watched it for at least 10 minutes before it disappeared, and it made a loud, angry roar. This image, by the way, that's up here, thanks go to Jack Dunn at Mueller Planetarium for providing some of these cool slides that I'm using today. That actually is the bell tower on UNL campus, and yeah, that is a UFO, only it's not really a UFO, it's actually an IFO, because they were doing a UFO program over at Mueller Planetarium one day, and they needed some UFO pictures, so they went out and made this one. But I like it anyway. I think it's a neat one. These other ones that we were looking at earlier, by the way, I'm not exactly sure where they were taken, but I want to keep the feel going for UFOs. So, in Alliance, 1984, one of the farmers that lived out there was awakened, he and his son, early in the morning because they saw a very bright light shining through their windows. When they went to check it out, they came to the realization that a UFO was hovering over their driveway, and it was shining a light down onto the ground. Alliance is an interesting place. The following year, 1985, there were police officers and residents of the area who were chasing what appeared to be tennis ball-sized UFOs. Remember, this is at a distance again. Chasing these things, is they thought it was a falling star at first, but when they started checking it out, they started moving all over the place and changed shapes and everything. In January of 1988, up in Omaha, there was an account of possible two planes crashing. And so the police went to investigate, but when they got there, all they found was a solid white object in the sky that was slowly moving to the south, and it got down as far as Gretna, and that's where the police stopped following it. In Lincoln here, 1994, in January, two police officers, Dave Munn and John Clark, spotted an object in the sky down around 18th and J. And as they were watching this thing, which is probably a meteor, by the way, but as they were watching this thing go across the sky, they said it was shooting sparks out the back. And when it got onto the other side of the Capitol, it just exploded into a fireworks display. That had to be cool, let me tell you. February 6, 1997, a couple from Curtis had an encounter. Mr. and Mrs. Wayne Whitmore were on their way back to York, and they saw a cattle truck had stopped on the side of the road, and so they stopped to see if everything was okay, and the driver was out there, and he was pointing up in the sky, and they went to see what it was that this guy was looking at, and they watched this great big UFO kind of moving across the sky and then just sort of disappear in the horizon. They didn't know what to make out of that, so they didn't make anything of it, and they left. In Burwell, let me move on to some of these other. The last UFO thing I'm going to talk about today is out in Butte. Butte seems to be a place where they have a lot of interesting unexplained phenomena take place out there, at least in the sky. I found accounts of a fellow who, he and his sister, watched some, again, the triangular-shaped stars moving across the night sky. But also out in Butte, we find these crop circles. Now, you know, typically when we think of crop circles, we think of England and that sort of thing, but Nebraska has them too. As to whether or not they're real or hoaxes, like I say, I make no claims one way or the other. This one was seen out by Butte. This one was in 1996 that this one happened. And was it just not too long after that, near Barada, there was another crop circle that was seen by a fellow named Charlie Kirkendall. And even though they determined that thing to be natural, he insisted that it wasn't. I've got a few more crop circle pictures here, including a couple of them from Waverly, which just happened not too long ago. There's some speculation about the veracity of these accounts too, but that they're neat nevertheless. My crop circle story goes like this. I was visiting a friend of mine out in Frontier County back in 1989, and the subject of crop circles somehow came up. I don't know, farmers. But as we were driving along, he was just listening to my story, you know, talking about him. And he said, "You're kidding, right?" And I said, "No, not at all." Well, we drive a couple more miles and we turn a corner and we stop. And he said, "You mean like that?" And he points out to this field, and I'm seeing a perfect crop circle in the field. And I said, yeah, it's just exactly like that. What is that? And he said, we don't know. Happens out here all the time. It's one of those things. It's one of those things that we just simply don't pay any attention to because it's so prevalent. Let's move on to some other weird things. I'm slowly running out of time. Quickly running out of time, actually. I'll run through these really fast. If you have any questions, we might have to wait until after the show for this one. Out in, I knew this would happen. I said, God, I hope I'm going to have enough material. Okay, out in 1938, out in the Hay Springs area, there was a place called Alkali Lake, later to be renamed Walgren Lake. And they said that there has been sightings over the years of this huge creature that lives out there. They call him Giganticus brutervius, that's what it is. And some say it's not real. Imagine. Well, I know that it is because we got a picture of it right here. If you look real carefully, look at the little car over here. We have that on display out there in the Weird Nebraska exhibit. You might want to check that out closer. I have a few stories connected to this one, but like I say, in the interest of time, we're going to have to pass on it. But nevertheless, Hay Springs does love their monster. And this is an image of the Centennial Button that was published, or that was printed back in 1985. We've got one of those on display out here, too. Remembering the past. You have to remember that whenever you think about things like the petrified man or the Alkali Lake monster, the name John Mayer has to come to mind. John was what was known as a paralyzer of the truth. And he enjoyed writing stories. He was from Chadron, and he enjoyed writing stories for folks back east who thoroughly believed that the American West was populated by savage red men, half-wild cowboys, damsels in distress, and the occasional Loch Ness-style monster. One of the other interesting creatures that live in Nebraska, this little fella here. Now, this is not a jack pine jackalope. This is the alkali area jackalope. There is a difference. Stories about him just go all over the place. And one of the best tales that I've heard is that they're capable of imitating a human's voice to perfection. And so they like to surprise people by singing late at night. Well, we've all heard about jackalopes, but have you ever heard about the monkey-faced road streaker? No, not too many people have. Well, up in Exeter in the 1950s, there were sightings of this monkey-like creature. A lot of tracks were found. In August of 1981, a fellow named Joe Schulte was up in the Lynch area, and he was driving along a road parallel to the Niobrara River when he and his daughter, who was in the car with him, came across this thing. They came walking across the road. They said that it was had a rounded head, a long neck, it had a short tail, and more than anything else, he said it looked like a monkey. It says 3 feet tall and moved a lot faster than a dog. Other accounts like this have been reported near Center and Verdell. In Center, Nebraska, up here in Knox County, back in December of 1982, Harry and Ina Mae Tichy had their experience with the unknown. As they were driving a dirt road on their way back to their home on this one particular evening, Ina Mae looked out the window and looked across a field, and she saw this dark, hairy figure with long arms lurching and limping across the field, and disappeared into the night. There are other stories, too, of Bigfoot-like encounters. In fact, around September 11th, 1974, in York, Nebraska, there were a rash of these things sighted. They were just referred to as a large, hairy creature seen by many people, and they range in size from 3.5 feet to 8 feet. And they weigh sometimes up to 1,000 pounds, which is pretty big when you think about it. There was even a York police officer that described seeing this thing. In June 1973, there was a fellow named Kim Teal and his friend Byron Harolds were out on Braymond Road out here in Lancaster County. And they were driving cars adjacent to each other. Kim was following Byron. And Kim noticed the car in front of him start to swerve a little bit and just started to accelerate quickly. Well, Kim looked around to see what in the world this guy was doing, and that was when he noticed out in the cornfield this large, dark, hominid, upright creature running toward the road. Well, it scared Kim as much as it probably scared Byron, and he accelerated just as the thing was reaching the road, and he said that as he was going, he actually heard a thump on the back of the car, like as if this thing might have actually hit him. On December 11th, 1982, down around Utica, a friend and his fiancée, this is a good story, a friend and his fiancée were returning from a wedding about 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, that might have something to do with this story. Okay. Well, as they were going down the road, they observed this tall, human-like creature that was human, like from the waist up, but from the waist down, they said it looked like Pan. This is the goat creature, the goat-like creature from Greek mythology. Well, you know, you can't tell stories like this without throwing in at least one good werewolf tale, and we have a couple of them in Lincoln, believe it or not. There was, back in March 14th, 1992, there was a woman that lived on West Q Street, and she was awakened about 3 o'clock in the morning. She heard something. She looked outside, and she saw this large creature that was standing on its hind legs. She said that it was tall and hairy. Might have been a biker, I don't know. But nevertheless, she said that as she made her appearance known, the thing dropped down on all fours, growled at her, and took off running into the woods. And so we don't know what that was. In the Nebraska City area, down in around Minersville, the old location of Minersville, on November 24th, 1968, there were reports of these 6-foot-tall, wolf-like faced creatures that were walking upright, scaring everybody. And I was going to talk about the mystery cats, you know, the phantom mountain lions and stuff, but I can't do that anymore because they're real. So that one doesn't fit anymore. There actually have been mountain lions here in Nebraska. And you can't tell a werewolf story without a goat, without a vampire story. So, and I had to look for one of these. Let me tell you, it wasn't real easy to track this one down, but I did discover up in Omaha. The original Omaha Playhouse used to be kind of within the same general area as Joslyn Castle up there. And there was a location in the lower levels of the playhouse that people could go down when they wanted to sneak away. This one particular couple back in the 50s, in fact, wanted to go down and have a smoke break. And so they would go down into the lower levels of this building. And you know, these tunnels, there were tunnels connecting all of this. I don't know what the history of Joslyn is or anything, but apparently it was necessary to have these tunnels. And they opened this, they found this one door, and they opened it up, and they went in this little room in there with this locked door, this iron door off to the one side. And so they kind of let that go. That became their secret hiding place. And they said that during the actual performance of whatever the show was, during the break in the acts, they went down, had a smoke, and they never came back. And they said that when people started looking for them, they found this one room, and they found that the door actually had been just a little bit ajar, and so naturally the story of vampires started cropping up. And those things are just hard to quell once you get one going. I'm going to go ahead now, in the interest of time, and sign things off. I would like to thank everyone who came out today to hear some interesting tales of Nebraska's oddities and its fun little history. And I will be around for questions if anybody has anything they'd like to ask. Thank you. Thank you.